In this video, we're going to talk about how to elaborate on literary analysis. Really, how do we take our evidence to that next level? Quick overview, we are going to talk about first structure, meaning how do we or where do we put it in the paragraph, and then technique, how do you do it? What do you even write to elaborate on your evidence? Let's start by defining the terms. First, when we say to elaborate, simply that means to expand on an idea. In the context of a literary analysis, the goal is that you're clarifying the importance of a piece of evidence. So whatever quote or part of the text you include, elaboration is where you start to show how that piece of evidence is important. Now, why use it? And think about it like this. If a lawyer were to walk into a courtroom and just put down a piece of evidence, do they leave it there or do they explain why it matters and how it proves their point? Now, they would go in and say, this evidence shows this evidence proves this. That's what we need to be doing with the quotes that we're pulling into our literary analysis. To start with, let's talk about structure. And we'll talk about when does elaboration happen in a paragraph. Now, usually this is pretty straightforward because typically it comes right after the evidence that you're using or a quote or if you're paraphrasing. So here's an example. We have this whole paragraph. The point is one of the ways society is controlled in Fahrenheit 451 is through the use of media as a distraction. That's our claim. You'll notice a little bit later down we have our evidence. So I've highlighted that in yellow. And just after that is where our elaboration happens. Now, the question is, why do we need elaboration? What does it do? So let's look at that same paragraph without the elaboration. So you'll notice we no longer have why this quote is important. We simply have a quote and then the paragraph ends. Another thing to think about is if you don't explain your quote, the reader can totally misinterpret why you're putting it there. They might take away a different point than you intended. So it's important to have our elaboration in there right after our quote. One of the hardest things is how we actually use elaboration, or what do we even write about? Now, the first thing I want to point out, when you have your evidence, what you don't want to do is this. Notice in green what's happening here. This quote shows that the person can't remember when they met their husband or wife. That's not elaboration. All that truly is summary. And that is not what we want to do. We don't want our elaboration to simply and only be explaining what happened in the quote. We want to be showing why the quote's important. So again, our goal is to clarify the importance of a piece of evidence. You might be asking yourself how you do that. So here are 4 potential ways that you can do that, and we're going to go through them one at a time. So the first one is you can explain what it reveals about a character's current state or how they've changed. So let's look at this here. Here's a paragraph. In The Flowers by Alice Walker, the reader watches Maya change in a moment as she encounters the harsh reality of the world. That's our claim, our topic sentence. In yellow is the evidence. You'll notice in green is the elaboration. And for this one, we're talking about how a character's changed. So I'm talking about how Maya maybe doesn't fully realize it right away, but slowly she begins to change and recognize the significance. I even have a second piece of evidence with additional elaboration after that, where I'm showing that her naivete has been ruined and she's been changed forever. Again, talking about this is what it shows us about the character and how they're changing. So that's one option. The second option is that you can connect the quote to an important word from your claim. Now, this helps make sure that you're really connecting it back to that claim and that you're proving what you really mean to be proving with the whole paragraph. So you'll notice again, we're writing about the flowers. The claim is that Alice Walker points out that our childhood ends the moment we experience information that makes us aware of the pain and suffering around us. Now, if you look down below in my elaboration, I've highlighted in gray those words again. What this does is create a word link between the claim that we're trying to prove and our elaboration, making sure that we're really focusing on our claim and explaining how our evidence connects back to that claim. So that's the second option. Connect the quote to an important word from your claim. Third, analyze a keyword, symbol, or phrase from the quote itself. So here's an example of that. Again, talking about the flowers. In the evidence, in the piece of evidence, it says Mayap laid down the flowers at the end of the story. And now I go in depth talking about the flowers. The flowers are literal, but their meaning is much greater than that. In the story, the flowers symbolize. So notice how I'm taking a key word or a key symbol and explaining why it's important or why it matters. So that's option number 3. Option number 4 is you can explain what the author might be trying to show us. This example has that here, talking about a different story, The Rights to the Streets of Memphis. The evidence talks about a stinging slap on his jaw, and the elaboration then goes into here's why the author may have made this choice. In this moment, the author doesn't want us to only see his mother as harsh, though. He wants us to see, and so notice how I'm going in and talking about what the author might be trying to show us through this piece of evidence. So now that's not all the different ways, but these are 4 important ways that you can elaborate on your evidence without just summarizing what happened. So a quick review. Elaboration helps you explain why your evidence matters, can be done by analyzing a character, keyword, or phrase, or an author's choices, and it must be used to make your evidence meaningful. Happy writing!